A giant staircase of green fields climbs a mountainside, defying gravity and time. These are the ancient terraces, and they hold a hidden design logic that transformed entire civilizations. By the end of this video, you will understand the precise engineering principles that allowed our ancestors to conquer impossible slopes. We will uncover how they mastered water on these vertiginous heights and why their methods are a secret weapon for our modern world. How does a society decide to reshape a mountain, and what does that choice reveal about our own relationship with the land? Scattered across the globe, from the Philippines to the Andes, these monumental staircases reveal a profound pattern. Entire mountain ranges on continents separated by vast oceans were reshaped by human hands using the same fundamental idea. This was not a technology that spread from a single source. Instead, it is a stunning example of what historians call convergent evolution. Cultures with no possible contact with one another, facing the same fundamental challenge of a steep slope, independently arrived at the same brilliant solution. They all built terraces, the breathtaking rice paddies of the Philippine Cordilleras, often called the stairway to the sky, and the ingeniously engineered Andenes of the Inca Empire, which fed millions, stand as separate testaments to the same universal human ingenuity. The sheer scale of these projects is what truly staggers the mind. We are not looking at a few small garden plots on a hillside. We are looking at the systematic transformation of entire mountain ranges, an undertaking that would have required the coordinated labor of thousands of people over many generations. This points to a level of social organization and long-term vision that is difficult for us to fully grasp today. It tells us that terrace farming was not merely a technique, it was a civilization's strategy for survival and growth. The fact that this strategy emerged again and again in isolation hints at a hidden design logic, a set of universal principles that made terraces the obvious answer to a universal problem. And this naturally leads us to a pivotal question, one that goes to the very heart of their existence. Why would a society choose to undertake such a Herculean task? Why carve a mountain when flat, fertile plains seem so much easier to farm? The answer lies not in a preference for hardship, but in a profound understanding of advantage. When you look at a steep mountain slope, you might see an obstacle. Ancient engineers saw a solution to multiple problems at once. As populations expanded, the most fertile and accessible flatlands were already claimed and cultivated. Communities faced a simple, powerful imperative: use every available space or face limitation. The mountains were not a first choice, but they became the greatest opportunity. By reshaping these slopes, they were not just creating farmland, they were building elevated strongholds. A terraced mountainside is naturally defensible, a formidable challenge for any potential invader. But the advantages run even deeper. Mountains create their own unique weather. A single slope can host a cascade of microclimates, with warmer conditions at the lower levels and cooler, misty environments higher up. This allowed farmers to cultivate a stunning diversity of crops, from sun-loving grains at the base to hardy tubers and specialized plants near the summit. Perhaps the most crucial strategic resource was water itself. Mountain terraces act as massive sponges, capturing rainfall and channeling the meltwater from high-altitude springs. This gave the community direct control over the most vital element in their world. They were not just farming the land, they were farming the entire mountainside, from its rocky bones to the clouds that clung to its peaks. This was the brilliant logic of turning a liability into the ultimate asset. but creating stable, fertile land on a sheer incline required a master plan, a hidden design that managed the relentless force of water itself. The mountain itself became the engine for its own cultivation. This brings us to the second, and perhaps most brilliant, principle of terrace design, the mastery of water itself. Ancient engineers did not fight the flow of water down a slope, they orchestrated it. They constructed a living, breathing irrigation network powered entirely by gravity. Picture each level of the terrace not just as a flat field, but as a shallow, level-bottomed bowl. When rain falls or water is released from above, it does not rush violently downhill. Instead, it pools in this basin, soaking deep into the soil and nourishing the crops. Only when the terrace has drunk its fill does the excess water spill over, gently and slowly, to the level below. This simple, repetitive action is the heart of the system. It transforms a destructive deluge into a life-giving trickle, one step at a time. To make this possible, builders created intricate networks of canals and sometimes even stone aqueducts to capture water directly from high-altitude springs. They would guide this precious resource to the very topmost terraces, establishing a command center for the entire hydrological operation. From that highest point, the water would begin its long, controlled descent. It would move through carefully carved notches in the terrace walls or through hollowed-out logs, passing from one farmer's plot to the next in a shared, community-wide flow. This design was not merely about providing consistent irrigation. It was a fundamental act of erosion control. On a bare, steep slope, a heavy rain gathers force and speed, clawing at the earth and carrying the vital topsoil away in a destructive cascade. The terraces broke that cycle. By slowing the water's journey, they forced it to deposit any sediment it was carrying, effectively trapping the soil and even building richer earth over time. This hydraulic logic protected the entire mountainside from the catastrophic landslides that would otherwise follow. The longevity of these ancient fields, some still in use after 1,000 years, stands as a direct result of this profound understanding. They did not just build farms, they built stable, self-sustaining landscapes, and the foundation of that entire landscape, the very flesh on the mountain's bones, was the soil they so carefully protected and cultivated. This careful curation of soil was an act of creation, not just preservation. On a raw mountain slope, fertile topsoil is a fleeting resource, constantly pulled downward by rain and gravity. Ancient builders confronted this reality with brilliant foresight. Each leveled terrace step acted as a giant trap, catching that precious, nutrient-rich earth and holding it in place. But they went far beyond simply stopping erosion. They became master soil scientists, actively engineering the very ground they farmed. They would mix in organic materials like composted plant waste and manure to replenish nutrients. In some regions, they discovered that adding certain types of clay could dramatically improve the soil's ability to hold water, a critical advantage during dry periods. They even incorporated crushed rock and gravel in specific layers to enhance drainage, preventing the waterlogged roots that could kill their crops. This was not guesswork. It was a deep, practical understanding of how to build a fertile, living medium from the mountain itself. The result was a rich, stable soil profile that could support intensive, continuous cultivation. Some of these ancient fields remain productive today, 1,000 years after their first planting, offering silent testimony to this profound ecological knowledge. Yet this entire intricate system, the carefully managed water and the painstakingly curated soil, all rested upon a single, critical foundation. The entire structure depended on the strength of the terrace walls holding it all together. Those silent walls were the true guardians of the entire system, bearing the crushing weight of earth and water with quiet strength. Their construction was a masterclass in passive engineering, a perfect marriage of simplicity and profound understanding. Builders did not simply pile rocks. They selected each stone with an artist's eye, considering its unique shape and its potential to interlock perfectly with its neighbors. The most remarkable walls were built without any mortar at all. They relied solely on precise fitting and the constant, unwavering pull of gravity to hold them together. This created structures that were not rigid and brittle, but flexible and resilient. They could shift and settle without collapsing, a crucial feature in earthquake-prone regions. The design went even deeper. The walls were intentionally built with a slight inward lean, a subtle feature that directed the immense pressure of the soil backward into the mountain itself, rather than outward toward the edge. And hidden within the stonework were small openings, weep holes that acted as pressure valves. During a drenching rain, when the soil behind the wall became saturated, these holes allowed the excess water to escape. This simple innovation prevented the build-up of hydrostatic pressure that would otherwise burst the wall apart from the inside. This empirical grasp of physics and geotechnics allowed these structures to withstand centuries of earthquakes, torrential rains, and the relentless test of time. They were not just walls, they were a dynamic part of a living landscape. This structural resilience was the final piece of a brilliant, interconnected system, one that did not just exist on the mountain, but actively regulated its entire ecosystem. This deliberate orchestration of the landscape went far beyond simple geometry. By sculpting the mountain into a giant staircase, the builders were also crafting a complex tapestry of miniature climates. Each level of the terrace, depending on its precise height and orientation, experienced a slightly different world of temperature, moisture, and sunlight. A single slope could host a dozen distinct growing environments, all within a short walking distance. This was the fifth principle, a masterful manipulation of microclimates. On a south-facing terrace in the northern hemisphere, the sun's rays would beat down directly, creating a warm, sheltered pocket perfect for growing maize or beans. Just around the bend, a north-facing terrace would remain in shadow for much of the day, preserving a cool, damp soil ideal for potatoes or certain leafy greens. The builders were not just farmers, they were ecological conductors, arranging the elements of their world to create a symphony of agricultural possibility. This intentional diversification was a powerful shield against famine. If a late frost damaged the tender crops on the warmer, lower terraces, the hardier varieties higher up would likely survive. If a disease struck one type of plant, the sheer variety of others ensured the community still had food. This approach transformed a single mountainside into a resilient, multi-layered pantry. It reflects a philosophy that saw the environment not as a static backdrop, but as a dynamic partner to be understood and gently guided. This holistic view of the world, where farming, engineering, and ecology were inseparable, points to a deeper wisdom that modern agriculture is only now beginning to rediscover. This deep integration with the natural world reveals the sixth and perhaps most profound principle of all, a holistic symbiosis with the local ecosystem. Ancient terracing was rarely an act of domination over nature, but rather one of thoughtful integration. The entire system was designed to function as a single, self-regulating ecological unit. Builders understood that the health of their fields was inextricably linked to the health of the mountain above them. They often left the highest slopes cloaked in native forest, recognizing this untouched land as a natural water factory. The trees would capture moisture from passing clouds and fog, channeling that water slowly down through the soil to feed the springs that supplied the terraces below. This was a brilliant, preemptive form of watershed management, ensuring a clean, consistent water supply without the need for complex machinery. The integration continued right down to the very walls of the terraces themselves. Farmers would often plant hardy grasses, herbs, or even small flowering shrubs directly into the crevices between the stones. These plants were not just decorative. Their roots knitted the stonework even more tightly together, providing extra stability against erosion. The flowers, in turn, attracted bees and other beneficial insects, which would then pollinate the crops growing on the terrace platforms. This created a miniature wildlife corridor and boosted biodiversity, turning the entire structure into a living, breathing habitat. This stands in stark contrast to the vast monocultures of modern industrial farming, where a single crop stretches for miles and the surrounding ecosystem is often seen as a threat to be eliminated. The ancient approach was one of partnership. It was a system that acknowledged its place within a larger, living world, and it was sustained by a sophisticated body of knowledge, a deep ecological wisdom passed down through generations without a single written word. This raises a compelling question. How was such a complex, multi-generational project conceived and managed by people we often mistakenly think of as primitive? The answer lies not in a blueprint, but in a living culture of knowledge. This deep ecological wisdom points to a seventh vital principle: the role of ancestral and empirical knowledge. The perfect placement of a terrace wall, the precise angle of an irrigation channel, these were not sudden inspirations. They were the hard-won results of countless seasons of observation, a legacy of learning passed from one generation to the next. This was a living, breathing science honed through patient trial and error over centuries. It encoded everything from the way a specific type of rock weathered in the local climate, to the subtle signs in the clouds that foretold a coming drought, to the exact companion plants that helped a staple crop thrive. This knowledge was the true blueprint, a detailed map of the mountain's secrets held not on parchment, but in the collective memory of the community. The responsibility for reading this map fell to elders and specialized engineers. These master builders possessed the skill to walk a raw, untamed slope and visualize the finished staircase of fields. They knew how to listen to the land, to identify the natural springs, the stable bedrock, and the subtle drainage paths that would determine the success or failure of the entire system. Their decisions dictated the exact placement, the size, and the orientation of every single terrace, ensuring the whole structure worked in perfect harmony with the mountain's own logic. This intergenerational transfer of expertise was the lifeblood of the terraces, a grandfather's lesson about a weak type of soil, a mother's technique for reinforcing a wall during the rainy season. This continuous stream of practical knowledge was as essential to the system's survival as the stones themselves. Without this shared cultural memory, the terraces would have slowly degraded, their intricate logic fading with each passing generation. This reliance on collective wisdom and long-term planning hints at something even larger, a social dimension that made these monumental projects possible in the first place. The very existence of these landscapes forces us to ask, what kind of society could coordinate such a vast and sustained effort over so many lifetimes? The sheer scale of these earthworks points to an eighth foundational principle, one rooted not in stone or water, but in human society itself. A single family could not carve a mountain, nor could a lone village maintain the intricate web of canals and walls for centuries. The existence of these massive terraces is a permanent monument to one of humanity's greatest achievements, large-scale social organization. This required the coordinated effort of thousands of people, all working toward a common, intergenerational goal. Historians suggest this labor was often mobilized through systems of reciprocal aid, where communities would come together to work on each other's plots in a shared understanding that everyone's survival depended on the whole system's health. In other, more centralized societies, a ruling authority might direct the labor, planning the grand design and ensuring its execution over many lifetimes. This collective endeavor did more than just move Earth, it wove the very fabric of society. It fostered a powerful sense of shared purpose and identity, turning a mountain into a communal project that belonged to everyone. This cohesion was vital for maintaining the system's most delicate aspect, the equitable distribution of water and land. A dispute over irrigation rights could shatter a community. So clear, mutually accepted rules for sharing this lifeblood were essential for long-term stability. The success of this model had a revolutionary consequence: the creation of a consistent economic surplus. For the first time, a society could produce enough food to support large numbers of people who were not farmers themselves. This abundance freed individuals to become full-time artisans, soldiers, priests, and administrators, paving the way for the complex civilizations whose grand cities we so often admire. Those cities, however, were ultimately built upon the agricultural wealth generated by the quiet, ordered slopes of the terraced mountains. This surplus did not just feed people, it fundamentally transformed what a society could become and the power it could wield. This agricultural surplus became a civilization's true currency, with a single mountainside producing more food than its immediate farmers required. Society itself could be reimagined. For the first time, not every pair of hands was needed in the fields. This freedom allowed for a revolutionary division of labor. Individuals could now dedicate their lives to perfecting a single craft, becoming full-time potters, weavers, metalworkers, or stonemasons. Others could specialize as administrators, priests, or soldiers, their needs met by the steady, abundant harvests flowing from the terraced slopes. This was the economic engine that built empires. In the Andes, the vast Andenes of the Inca were not just beautiful, they were phenomenally productive. They churned out immense stores of potatoes and maize, which could be freeze-dried and stored for years. This robust food supply was the literal fuel for imperial expansion, feeding the massive armies and labor crews that built a network of roads and cities spanning thousands of miles. The terraces turned a challenging geography into a strategic advantage, creating an economic foundation so solid that it supported one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. Beyond feeding armies, this surplus integrated isolated mountain communities into vast trade networks. Staple crops like rice from Asian highlands or potatoes from the Andes could be transported and exchanged for goods the mountains could not provide, such as salt, tools, or exotic textiles. In some cases, the food itself became a form of currency, used to pay taxes or tribute to a central authority. This flow of goods and wealth transformed terraced landscapes from mere food production zones into critical nodes in a wider economic web. The profound success of this system is written in its incredible longevity. Many of these ancient terraces remained in continuous, productive use for 500, 800, even 1,000 years. They outlasted the empires they helped create, a testament to a design so resilient and an economic model so effective that it sustained generations long after the original builders were gone. This lasting power forces us to confront a difficult modern paradox. Why, with all our advanced technology, do our agricultural systems so often degrade the very land they depend on, while these ancient stone structures only enriched theirs over centuries? Their endurance is the ultimate validation of their design. While modern farms often battle declining soil health after just a few decades, these ancient terraces have flourished for 1,000 years or more. Their secret was a closed-loop system, a self-renewing cycle that mimicked the resilience of a natural forest. Nothing was wasted. Water was captured and reused in its slow, gravity-fed descent. Soil was not just protected but actively built up through the constant addition of organic matter and the natural trapping of sediments. Fertility was maintained by composting plant waste and using animal manure, creating a perpetual nutrient cycle within the boundaries of the farm itself. This system required no synthetic fertilizers or pesticides trucked in from distant factories. It was a world that ran on sunlight, rainfall, and profound ecological intelligence, a stark contrast to the resource-intensive nature of much contemporary agriculture. Modern methods often create a dependency on external inputs, mining the soil of its vitality and then attempting to replace it with chemicals. The terraces worked in the opposite direction. Their careful management was inherently regenerative, enhancing the land's innate productivity with each passing season. They did not simply extract value from the earth, they invested in it, and the land repaid that investment for centuries. This legacy presents a quiet challenge to our current assumptions about progress. It demonstrates that human activity, when thoughtfully guided, can exist not as a force of depletion but as a partner in a long-term, flourishing partnership with nature. This wisdom, carved into the sides of mountains, feels more urgent now than ever before. The enduring legacy of these ancient terraces casts our modern approach to sloped land in a revealing new light. When we look at contemporary methods of cultivating hillsides, the contrast in philosophy and outcome could not be more profound. Modern industrial agriculture often begins by clearing a slope entirely, removing the trees and vegetation that anchor the soil. Then heavy machinery plows the land in straight lines, following the contour of the hill but leaving the soil exposed and vulnerable. This approach treats the mountain as a simple, two-dimensional surface, a blank slate for maximum short-term yield. A single heavy rain on such a landscape has catastrophic consequences. With no living roots to hold it and no terraces to slow its flow, the water gathers speed and power, clawing away the precious topsoil in a single destructive event. This leads to a devastating cycle of loss where the very foundation of fertility is washed away, requiring ever-increasing amounts of chemical fertilizers to replace what nature once provided for free. The ancient terrace builders would have seen this not as progress, but as a fundamental misunderstanding of the mountain's logic. Their entire system was designed to prevent this exact scenario, to work with the forces of gravity and water rather than against them. This divergence represents more than just different farming techniques. It reveals a deep schism in our relationship with the land itself. The ancient worldview saw the mountain as a complex, living partner in a symbiotic relationship. Every decision, from the placement of a wall to the selection of a crop, was made with the long-term health of the entire system in mind. The goal was not just to harvest food this season, but to ensure the mountain would remain fertile for the grandchildren of your grandchildren. In stark contrast, the industrial model often views the landscape as a commodity, a resource to be extracted from until it is depleted. This short-term thinking creates a cascade of negative consequences far beyond the field. The soil that erodes from the cleared slopes clogs rivers and reservoirs with silt. The chemical fertilizers and pesticides that replace natural fertility run off into waterways, creating dead zones where no aquatic life can survive. The loss of diverse habitats on the terraced slopes, which once buzzed with insects and birds, leads to a silent, simplified landscape. This comparison is not about romanticizing the past, but about recognizing a critical fork in the road for our own future. The ancient principles of working with gravity, building soil, and fostering biodiversity are not relics. They are a proven toolkit for resilience. In an era of climate change where intense rainfall and prolonged droughts are becoming more common, the wisdom of capturing every drop of water and holding the soil in place is more relevant than ever. Relearning this design logic could be the key to transforming our own agricultural challenges, turning vulnerable slopes into resilient, productive landscapes that can feed communities for generations to come, just as they did in the ancient world. The quiet resilience of these ancient landscapes speaks directly to our era of climate uncertainty. Their design offers a powerful blueprint for buffering against the very extremes that threaten modern agriculture. The same principles that allowed them to endure for a millennium now present a compelling strategy for climate adaptation. Consider the dual threats of drought and flood. A modern farm on a bare slope is defenseless against both. A prolonged dry spell desiccates the exposed soil, while an intense downpour becomes a destructive torrent. The terraced mountain, however, responds with a logic we have largely forgotten. Its stepped profile acts as a massive sponge, capturing torrential rains that would otherwise cause flooding downstream. It holds that water in the soil, releasing it slowly over weeks or even months, effectively creating its own underground reservoirs to sustain crops during dry periods. This single system mitigates two opposing disasters at once. Beyond water management, these terraced landscapes are also powerful allies in the fight against rising atmospheric carbon. The vast, continuous areas of vegetation on the terraces, from the staple crops to the grasses and shrubs on the walls, pull carbon dioxide from the air. This carbon is then stored or sequestered in the plant biomass and, most importantly, in the rich, deep soils that centuries of careful management have built. A single terrace might seem modest, but the collective effect of an entire mountainside transforms it into a significant carbon sink, actively cooling the planet while it produces food. This integrated approach also builds adaptability through biodiversity. The variety of microclimates and habitats supports a wider range of plant and animal life. This genetic diversity is a critical form of insurance. If a new pest emerges or a shift in temperature patterns disadvantages one crop, the others in the system are more likely to persevere. A monoculture is fragile, but a diverse, terraced ecosystem is resilient, able to adapt and reconfigure itself in the face of change. This potential is not just a historical footnote. It is being actively rediscovered today. From the high Andes to the mountains of Southeast Asia, communities and conservationists are rehabilitating ancient terraces that had fallen into disuse. They are recognizing that this old technology is a remarkably sophisticated tool for modern problems. New projects are also applying these principles, designing contemporary terraces that manage water, build soil, and store carbon. We are slowly relearning that some of the most powerful solutions for our uncertain future were carved into the earth by our ancestors long ago. This quiet revival is happening now, on mountainsides from Peru to the Philippines. After decades of neglect, ancient terraces are being carefully brought back to life. Teams of archaeologists, engineers, and local farmers are working side by side, carefully resetting stones that had tumbled down over centuries and clearing irrigation canals choked with debris. This is far more than an archaeological restoration. It is a functional resurrection. The goal is to see these fields produce food once again, to reactivate the ancient hydraulic logic that once made these slopes flourish. Each rebuilt wall becomes a living classroom, a place where empirical knowledge passed down through generations meets modern soil science and hydrological modeling. In the Andes, the restoration of pre-Columbian Andenes has led to dramatic increases in crop yields for local communities, proving that these old ways can still outperform modern methods in these challenging environments. The driving force behind this movement is a profound cultural reawakening. For the descendants of the original builders, these terraces are not relics. They are the physical embodiment of their heritage, a sacred landscape that connects them to their ancestors. The act of restoring them is a spiritual practice, a way of healing a broken bond with the land and reclaiming a vital part of their identity. This powerful combination of practical benefit and deep cultural meaning is what sustains these long-term projects. It demonstrates that the most sustainable systems are those that are not only ecologically sound but also culturally cherished. This global effort to relearn a forgotten design logic begs a final, forward-looking question. If we can successfully resurrect these ancient systems, what might we learn about designing our own future? These breathtaking landscapes were far more than just farmland. They were a civilization's sacred text written upon the earth. The physical labor of moving stones was intertwined with a profound spiritual practice, a continuous dialogue with the divine. For many of these cultures, the mountain was not an inanimate pile of rock. It was a living deity, a powerful ancestor, or the very axis of the world. To carve terraces into its slopes was not an act of conquest, but one of devotion. It was a way to honor the mountain's generosity, to cultivate its sacred body, and to enter into a reciprocal relationship with it. This spiritual bond transformed maintenance from a chore into a ritual, a duty owed to the gods and to the ancestors who first established the covenant with the land. The terraces became a permanent prayer for rain, for sun, and for a bountiful harvest, their very existence a testament to a people's faith. This reverence was often encoded into the very layout of the fields. The rhythmic, repeating patterns of the terraces, stair-stepping toward the heavens, frequently mirrored cosmological beliefs about layered worlds or the path to the divine. In some remarkable instances, the entire system was aligned with celestial events. Key terraces or irrigation channels might be positioned to catch the first light of the solstice sun, or to frame the rising of a particularly important star or constellation. This embedded a sophisticated astronomical calendar directly into the landscape, turning the act of farming into a participation in the cosmic order. The knowledge of how to build and maintain the terraces was therefore sacred knowledge. It was not merely technical skill, but a spiritual inheritance passed down through generations of priests, elders, and master builders. This cultural framework was the ultimate safeguard for the system's longevity. A wall that was seen as part of a living, sacred whole was far more likely to be carefully repaired than one viewed as a simple property boundary. This holistic worldview, where the practical, the ecological, and the spiritual were inseparable, is the final master principle that explains the stunning endurance of these places. They succeeded not just as feats of engineering, but as complete, culturally resonant worlds. The Andenes of the Inca Empire stand as a perfect symphony of these ancient design principles. Carved into the dramatic peaks of the Andes, these terraces were not just farms, they were masterpieces of high-altitude engineering. The Incas understood that a one-size-fits-all approach would fail on such extreme terrain. So they engineered each Anden from the ground up, starting with what we cannot see. Beneath the visible surface of fertile soil, they constructed deep layers of crushed rock and gravel. This subterranean foundation acted like a giant French drain, ensuring that even during the heaviest mountain downpours, water would never pool around the roots of their crops. It was a hidden insurance policy against rot and waterlogging. Above this, they were meticulous soil scientists. They did not simply use the dirt they found, they created custom soil profiles, transporting specific types of earth and organic matter to different terrace levels to perfectly match the needs of the crop they intended to grow there. This careful curation of the earth was then supplied by an equally brilliant water system. They constructed stone canals that ran for miles, capturing the pure, cold water from glacial melts and high-altitude springs. This gravity-fed network delivered precise hydration to every single level of their vertical farm, from the highest maize fields to the lowest potato plots. This mastery of microclimates allowed the Incas to cultivate a staggering diversity of food. On the warmer, lower Andenes, they grew maize and beans. As the terraces climbed thousands of feet, the cooler temperatures created ideal conditions for dozens of varieties of potatoes and quinoa. A single mountainside could produce a complete and balanced diet, a feat impossible on flat land. This incredible productivity did more than just feed local communities. It generated the massive surplus required to build an empire. The food from these terraces fueled the armies and labor crews that connected a vast territory with a network of roads and cities. The Andes were the economic engine of the largest empire in the ancient Americas, and their legacy is not confined to history books. Many of these stone-built terraces are still cultivated by local farmers today, their original logic as sound as it was 500 years ago. This enduring success in South America finds a powerful echo on the other side of the world, in the equally breathtaking rice terraces of Southeast Asia. Across the globe, the Ifugao people of the Philippines achieved a parallel miracle of mountain engineering. The Banaue rice terraces rise like giant emerald staircases, a monument carved not by slaves for a king, but by free families for their community over 2,000 years. They were shaped with nothing more than simple hand tools and an immense collective will, a testament to what a society can achieve when every generation contributes to a shared vision. This was not merely construction, it was a continuous act of cultural creation. The entire system is fed by a brilliant, living water network. The Ifugao recognized the mountaintop rainforest as the sacred source of all life. They carefully managed these upland woods, knowing the trees captured mist and rain, releasing the water slowly into the soil. From there, they engineered an intricate web of canals, some ingeniously carved from hollowed-out bamboo, to divert this crystal-clear water from the highest springs down to the very topmost terrace. This gravity-powered delivery system ensured that every single one of the thousands of terrace levels received its vital share, a hydrological dance choreographed with perfect precision. But the true genius of Banaue lies not just in its water management, but in the vibrant, self-fertilizing ecosystem it sustains. This is a world of 3 layers. Rice plants form the primary crop, their roots submerged in the water that cascades from one level to the next. In that same water, small fish swim, providing a crucial source of protein for the farmers. And floating on the surface is a tiny, unassuming fern called azolla. This plant is a powerhouse, pulling nitrogen directly from the air and converting it into a natural fertilizer for the rice. It also spreads across the water's surface, blocking sunlight and naturally suppressing weeds. This elegant polyculture creates a closed loop of food and fertility, where each element supports the others without any need for external inputs. This physical landscape is utterly inseparable from the social and spiritual one. The knowledge of how to maintain the terraces and distribute water fairly is woven into the fabric of Ifugao life, guided by a council of elders. Their intricate calendar of rituals, from the blessing of new fields to prayers for rain, reflects a deep-seated belief that farming is a sacred covenant between the people, their ancestors, and the mountain spirits. The terraces are not just fields they own, they are a living, breathing part of their cultural identity. This holistic integration of ecology, engineering, and belief created a way of life that endured for millennia. The enduring logic of Banaue is now providing a new key for archaeologists. helping them decode terrace systems in other unexpected parts of the world where the original builders left no written records behind. The stone-walled terraces of the Mediterranean tell a quieter story than their towering counterparts in Asia, yet their impact was just as profound. Across the sun-baked hills of Greece, Italy, and Turkey, ancient farmers faced a different kind of challenge. Their mountains were not draped in monsoon rains, but were often arid and rocky. The hidden design logic, however, proved beautifully adaptable. Here, the goal was not to manage an abundance of water, but to capture and conserve every single precious drop. They carved the slopes into a series of level steps, each one acting as a shallow basin. When the sporadic, heavy rains did fall, the terraces stopped the water from immediately rushing downhill and vanishing. Instead, it would pool, sinking deep into the soil to nourish the roots of drought-resistant crops like olive trees, grapevines, and hardy grains. This simple act of slowing down the water's journey transformed entire landscapes, turning what would have been barren, eroded hillsides into a mosaic of productive green. The very walls that made this possible were feats of practical artistry. Built without mortar in the dry stone style, these structures were more than just retaining barriers. The countless crevices between the stones became miniature habitats, creating a sanctuary for lizards, insects, and spiders. This unintentionally boosted the local ecosystem, turning the agricultural infrastructure into a network of biodiversity corridors. The pollinators and pest controllers that thrived there would have naturally benefited the crops, creating a subtle, self-regulating partnership. These terraced slopes became the agricultural backbone for the classical world. The olive oil that fueled Greek lamps, the wine traded across the Roman Empire, and the wheat that fed its legions often originated on these engineered mountainsides. The principles of erosion control and water harvesting were the same, but the application was perfectly tailored to a new environment. This reveals a crucial truth. The terrace was not a single, rigid design, but a flexible blueprint. It was a universal language of land management, spoken with a local accent. Its grammar was written in stone and water, and today we are learning to read it again with the help of a powerful new tool. The silent logic carved into these mountains is now speaking to us through the language of lasers and satellites. A technological renaissance is unlocking the full scale of ancient terracing, revealing patterns and connections that have been hidden for centuries beneath dense jungle canopies and layers of soil. From high above, Lidar scanners fire millions of light pulses toward the Earth, digitally stripping away the vegetation to map the ground beneath. What emerges is a breathtaking digital ghost, a sprawling network of terraces, canals, and pathways that once formed a complete, integrated landscape. This aerial perspective shows us how these agricultural systems were not isolated farms but the very arteries of civilization, directly linked to settlements, ceremonial centers, and long-distance trade routes. We can now trace the ancient logic that placed a terrace complex directly below a mountain spring, or how a main canal fed a sequence of fields in a precise, deliberate order. This grand, landscape-wide view was impossible for any single person on the ground to perceive, but it was the master plan the original builders followed. To understand the internal genius of a single terrace, scientists turn to other tools. Ground-penetrating radar sends signals into the earth, painting a picture of the hidden substructure without ever lifting a shovel. This non-invasive method confirms the sophisticated layering the Inca used, showing the deep gravel beds and customized soil profiles that lie beneath the surface. Sophisticated soil analysis can detect the chemical fingerprints of ancient farming practices, revealing how specific nutrients were managed and replenished over generations. This quantitative data provides something profoundly important: scientific validation for the empirical wisdom of the ancient engineers. We can now run digital simulations that model water flow across 1,000 terraces during a simulated storm, or calculate the structural stress on a dry stone wall during an earthquake. The results consistently prove that these were not just effective designs, they were often optimally efficient. This hard data transforms our understanding from mere admiration into actionable knowledge. It gives modern engineers, farmers, and policymakers the evidence they need to argue that these ancient principles are not obsolete history, but a vital resource for building a more resilient future. This fusion of past wisdom and present technology is creating a new blueprint, one that could help us redesign our own relationship with the land. Every curve of these ancient landscapes followed a hidden mathematical rhythm. The gentle slant of a terrace bed was never accidental. It was a precise calculation made to capture the sun's arc across the sky. Builders understood that a slight tilt could mean the difference between a field bathed in light and one left in shadow. Yet this angle had to perform a delicate balancing act. The terrace needed to be perfectly level to hold its precious pool of water, a still, shallow lake for the rice or other crops to thrive. Achieving both optimal sunlight and perfect water retention was a geometric puzzle solved not with calculators, but with generations of sharp-eyed observation. The relationship between the wall and the field it held was equally critical. A tall, imposing wall required a wide, deep terrace behind it to counter the immense pressure of the earth and water. If the terrace was too narrow, the whole structure could simply push forward and collapse under its own weight. Conversely, a very wide terrace backed by a short wall was a waste of precious labor and materials, an inefficient use of the mountain surface. The builders intuitively found the golden ratio, the perfect proportion between wall height and terrace width that guaranteed stability for centuries. This was not abstract math, it was the physics of survival written in stone and soil. The result of this unconscious calculation was a landscape of profound harmony. The repeating patterns of wide fields and low walls on gentle slopes, or of narrower steps and taller walls on steeper inclines, create a visual rhythm that feels naturally right to the human eye. This is why we perceive these places as beautiful. Their beauty is not a decorative afterthought, it is the direct byproduct of a deep, functional logic. The mathematical precision that ensured their structural resilience is the very same thing that gives them their timeless, graceful form. This seamless blend of utility and elegance points to a design philosophy where every element served multiple purposes. The wall was not just a support, it was a thermal mass, a habitat, and a component of a visual masterpiece. This holistic thinking extended even to the smallest details, including the very materials they chose to build with. This breathtaking beauty was never an accident. The staggering visual power of these landscapes, their rhythmic patterns climbing toward the clouds, speaks to a 20th principle: the profound aesthetic and symbolic power of their form. These were not just functional farms, they were a civilization statement written across the mountainside. The repeating, level lines impose a powerful sense of order and harmony onto the raw, chaotic slopes of the natural world. It is a visual rhythm that is both deeply calming and utterly majestic, a pattern so compelling we instinctively describe it as a staircase to the sky or the very fingerprints of the gods. This beauty was almost certainly an intentional part of the design, reflecting a core cultural value that the lived environment should nourish the spirit as well as the body. Creating a world that was pleasing to the eye reinforced the sacred bond between the people and their land, turning the entire mountain into a vast, open-air temple. On a symbolic level, the act of carving fertile, level plains from a rugged, untamed peak is a powerful metaphor for civilization itself. It represents the human impulse to create stability, predictability, and abundance from the wild and uncertain. This symbolic power did not fade with the cultures that built them. It continues to resonate deeply, inspiring modern artists who see in their lines a perfect fusion of nature and human intention. Architects and urban planners study these forms, seeking to replicate their sense of harmonious scale and integration in our own cities. The terraces stand as a timeless reminder that the most enduring solutions are those that are not only efficient but also beautiful, speaking to something fundamental within us all. This legacy of deep integration invites us to reconsider the very purpose of our own built environments. These ancient principles are now quietly reshaping the very fabric of our modern cities. The timeless logic of the terraces, with their mastery of gravity and local materials, offers a powerful blueprint for contemporary landscape architecture. We see this in the growing movement to design sustainable and resilient urban spaces that work with nature, not against it. The modern equivalents are all around us if you know where to look. A rooftop garden on a city skyscraper is not so different from a high mountain Andenes. It captures rainwater, reduces the building's energy costs, and creates a small, productive oasis in an otherwise hard landscape. A lush green wall covered in vegetation functions like a vertical terrace, cooling the air, cleaning pollutants, and providing a habitat for urban wildlife. Even a stepped urban park that cascades down a hillside is a direct descendant of the ancient terrace, managing stormwater runoff while offering residents a beautiful, accessible green space. These projects are modern applications of a very old idea, reintegrating the life-giving functions of nature back into our concrete and steel environments. The core lesson is a shift in perspective, from viewing land as a flat surface to be built upon, to seeing it as a dynamic, three-dimensional partner. This requires us to value our relationship with the land in a new way, prioritizing long-term health over short-term convenience. It means choosing to build with permeable surfaces that allow the earth to breathe, and designing water systems that mimic the gentle, cascading flow of a terraced mountainside, rather than rushing everything into overwhelmed sewers. By embracing this ancient design logic, we can create cities that are not only more efficient and climate-resistant, but also more beautiful, restorative, and truly livable for everyone. This global recognition comes with a profound dilemma. The very fame that celebrates these ancient terraces now places them in unprecedented danger. The footsteps of thousands of visitors each year, while a source of vital income, slowly but surely grind down the fragile stone paths and erode the meticulously built walls. The constant vibration and pressure can destabilize structures that have withstood earthquakes for centuries. An even more insidious threat emerges from a quiet exodus as younger generations, drawn by opportunities in distant cities, leave behind the farming traditions of their ancestors. When the hands that know how to repair a dry stone wall or clear a water channel are gone, the entire system begins a slow, silent collapse. A terrace abandoned is not merely a field left fallow. It is a machine that has lost its operator, and like any complex machine, it will eventually break down. The central challenge is a delicate balancing act: how to harness the economic power of tourism without letting it destroy the very heritage people come to see. The solution cannot be a simple fence and a ticket booth. The most successful models around the world are turning visitors into temporary stewards. In community-based tourism initiatives, travelers do not just take photographs, they participate. They might spend an afternoon learning from an elder how to reset stones in a wall, or help a local family clear an irrigation canal. This transforms the tourist from a passive observer into an active participant in the landscape's preservation. The revenue generated directly funds maintenance crews and supports the families who choose to continue farming, making it economically viable to uphold the old ways. This approach ensures the terraces remain what they were always meant to be: living, breathing landscapes that feed both the body and the spirit, not static museum exhibits frozen in time. The future of these stone-carved wonders ultimately depends on this fragile synergy between global interest and local care, a partnership that must be nurtured as carefully as the fields themselves. This fusion of timeless wisdom and cutting-edge technology is already taking root. The future of our sloping lands may depend on a synergistic partnership where the ancient logic of the terrace is supercharged by modern innovation. We are beginning to see the emergence of what could be called smart terraces. Picture a mountainside sculpted with the same careful geometry used for centuries, but now embedded with a network of silent, watchful sensors. These tiny devices constantly monitor the soil's moisture and nutrient levels. When the earth begins to thirst, the system doesn't wait for a farmer's guess. It triggers a precise, automated irrigation network that delivers water with surgical accuracy, using the same ancient principle of gravity flow to minimize energy use. This is not a replacement of the old ways, but an evolution, allowing us to manage water with a frugality and precision our ancestors could only dream of. This integration extends to the very plants we grow. Researchers are now developing new, drought-resistant and nutrient-efficient crop varieties specifically designed to thrive in these restored terrace environments. The goal is to create a system that produces more food with less water and fewer external inputs, building upon the closed-loop ideal of the ancient models. We can also enhance the original design with new ecological insights. By integrating agroforestry, planting carefully selected trees among the terrace crops, we can boost the system's natural resilience. These trees provide shade that reduces water loss, their roots anchor the soil even more firmly, and their fallen leaves create a natural compost, all while pulling significantly more carbon from the atmosphere. This creates a richer, more complex ecosystem than was possible in the past. This powerful fusion of old and new creates a robust toolkit for the immense challenges of the 21st century, from food security to climate adaptation. It recontextualizes these ancient landscapes completely. They are no longer just relics of a bygone era, but active prototypes, a living library of design principles that can guide us toward a more resilient and harmonious relationship with the earth. Their enduring stonework offers a quiet challenge, a question we are only now learning how to answer fully. The same principles that carved fertile steppes from earthly mountains may one day shape the landscapes of other worlds. In a fascinating convergence of past and future, researchers are looking at ancient terrace design as a potential blueprint for sustaining life on Mars. The red planet presents a challenge our ancestors would find strangely familiar: a harsh, sloped terrain with scarce water and barren soil. The fundamental logic of transforming an inhospitable incline into a stable, productive system is precisely what is needed. Concepts for Martian agriculture envision pressurized, domed environments built into the natural slopes of crater walls or valleys. These would not be flat greenhouses, but multi-leveled terraced structures. Each level would act as a separate, controllable biosphere, maximizing the use of limited volume and allowing for different crop types or atmospheric conditions. This step design is not just about space efficiency, it is a direct application of ancient water and gravity management. On a world where every drop of water is precious, a terraced system would allow for a closed-loop hydroponic or aeroponic network. Water and nutrients would be carefully circulated from the highest level down, with each terrace filtering and reusing the runoff in a continuous cycle, mimicking the slow, cascading descent of a mountain aquifer. The Martian soil, known as regolith, is toxic and devoid of organic life, much like raw mountain bedrock. The process of amending it, of gradually building a fertile medium by introducing organic compounds and carefully managed minerals, echoes the ancient practice of creating rich soil profiles layer by layer. This vision transforms the terrace from a relic of Earth's history into a prototype for humanity's greatest adventure. It suggests that the most advanced solution for living on a new world might be written in the stones of our oldest ones. Even with all our modern tools and knowledge, these ancient landscapes guard their deepest secrets with a quiet resolve. The sheer scale of coordination required to build the vast Andenes of the Inca, for instance, presents a monumental puzzle. This was an empire that functioned with incredible precision across thousands of miles, yet it had no widespread written language as we know it. How did they communicate the exacting specifications for a terrace wall or the complex schedule for planting and irrigation across such immense distances and over so many generations? The answer seems to lie in a sophisticated, living network of oral tradition and specialized messengers, but the precise mechanisms of this grand, unwritten management system continue to elude us. Another lingering mystery surrounds the spiritual life that breathed meaning into the stones. We know these projects were imbued with deep ceremonial significance, but what specific rituals accompanied the first cut into a virgin mountainside? What prayers were offered to the mountain spirits when a new water channel was opened, or when a family's first crop was sown on a freshly built terrace? These intimate moments of faith, the very ceremonies that consecrated the land and bound the community to it, have largely faded into silence, leaving us to piece together their echoes from archaeological fragments and the practices of descendant communities. Perhaps the most tantalizing question of all is one of sheer scale. Are we still only seeing a fraction of their achievement? Vast stretches of jungle in Southeast Asia and remote deserts in the Middle East remain largely unexplored from an archaeological perspective. It is entirely possible that beneath those dense canopies or shifting sands lie the remnants of terrace systems even larger and more complex than the ones we already marvel at, waiting to tell their story. The pursuit of these answers is what keeps the field so vibrant. Each new discovery, whether it is a forgotten terrace complex revealed by satellite imagery or a new interpretation of an old artifact, does more than just solve an old puzzle. It peels back another layer, revealing a deeper, more nuanced picture of human ingenuity and reminding us that these stone narratives are far from finished. They continue to challenge our assumptions about the past, pushing us to continually rethink the limits of what ancient societies could accomplish. These stone puzzles cannot be solved by any single expert working alone. Their true complexity demands a new kind of inquiry, one that bridges the deep chasms between our modern disciplines. An engineer might calculate the precise angle of a wall that allows it to stand for 1,000 years, yet have no insight into the cultural taboos that prevented anyone from quarrying stone from a sacred spring. An ecologist can map the incredible biodiversity thriving on a terrace, while an anthropologist deciphers the oral histories that detail the community's rules for sharing water. Each holds a vital piece of the map, but only when these pieces are laid side by side does the full picture of this socio-ecological technological marvel finally emerge. This collaborative model is more than just a modern research strategy. It is an echo of the very communal effort that built the terraces in the first place. It recognizes that the original blueprint was not a single document, but a living tapestry woven from threads of practical physics, deep ecological observation, and sacred cultural belief. To understand why a terrace was built in one specific location and not another, you need the geologist to assess the bedrock, the hydrologist to trace the water source, and the knowledge keeper to share the story of the ancestor who first received a vision to build there. This unified effort transforms our appreciation from simple admiration of a clever farming technique to a profound respect for a complete, integrated worldview. It is through this lens of collective intelligence that we can finally begin to grasp the full, magnificent legacy of these landscapes and what they can teach us about building a sustainable future. From the Andes to the Cordilleras, we have walked the contours of a lost design manual. These ancient staircases are far more than just farms. They are a living philosophy carved in stone. Their logic offers a quiet but potent inheritance for our own era of environmental strain. The principles of capturing every drop of water, of building soil as a sacred trust, and of engineering with the mountain instead of against it are not relics. They are a vital toolkit for resilience. These landscapes challenge us to see the world differently. A steep slope is not a barrier to be flattened, but a potential sponge to be sculpted. A scarcity of water is not a dead end, but a puzzle for a gravity-fed network. The ancient builders teach us that the most powerful solutions often emerge from a profound partnership with the natural world, not a battle against it. Let these enduring stairways to the sky inspire a new perspective. The greatest challenges we face, from food security to a changing climate, can be met with the same blend of ingenuity and respect. They stand as a testament to what is possible when we choose the long view, building for our grandchildren's grandchildren. We would love to hear which of these ancient principles you find most compelling for our modern world. Share your thoughts in the comments and join us for our next journey into the mysteries of our shared human past.